right, we are going to go ahead and get started here. We have a small but mighty crew here to work with, but if you have any questions or concerns, you can go ahead and type into the Q&A section of Zoom, where I have my colleagues Emily and Jane on hand to help answer anything that comes up. I'm Sierra, and together we are all client success managers here at Mixmax. So we work with our product and clients every day, and hopefully we can give you a good overview here to get you started in the platform. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started here with the walkthrough. So we have kind of two parts of Mixmax. The first is the Gmail extension, which we'll go out through kind of first in this walkthrough. And we also have a dashboard. And the way I like to talk about how these two things work together is that you should go to the dashboard for monitoring things like your activity, looking at reports, statistics, to understand how what you're doing in Mixmax is impacting your client-facing work or the work that you're doing with the product. And then also to create assets like templates for emails, sequences, meeting templates that you can then use in Gmail to help make your day a little more efficient and to give you more tools within Gmail, again, to just help you move more quickly within where you're spending most of your time in the day. So with that in mind, I'm going to start in the extension here in Gmail and show you some of the changes that Mixmax makes there. And I'll also point out how you can use the dashboard to access some of these tools and get a little more use out of them. So the first thing you'll probably notice when you download Mixmax for the first time and as you start to use it is that we have some presence in Gmail. So you'll notice this big Mixmax M here, this smaller Mixmax M in your sidebar, depending on your seat type, that will open up some additional features. And then also just like within the threading system itself, you'll start to notice that we apply different labels depending on the features that you're using. And also I'm just going to give this a quick refresh, because you should also see some tracking lightning bolts that indicate if your message has been read and who it's been read by. So yeah, here we go. After that refresh, we can start to see that those are going to appear. Great. Okay, so when you hover over those little lightning bolts, that's another kind of visual impact that you'll see and hopefully be able to use as you're reaching out to folks day to day. One thing to note about these tracking lightning bolts is that we're going to apply tracking unless you tell us to turn it off to basically every email that you send out. So you should see these on most things once Mixmax is enabled. And if you have sidebar, a place where you can kind of organize these tracking insights, I'd say, is under this lightning bolt in the sidebar. So this is taking all of this tracking information that we're doing one-off for each email and consolidating it into sort of a running list of the most recent activities within your inbox. So this view can be really helpful if you're trying to kind of like log into Gmail and understand where your first impacts for the day are going to be best used. So for example, maybe you can come here and look only at things that have been opened in the last few days and try to prioritize reaching out to people who have engaged with your email and who have at least opened and read it before you jump into talking to people or trying to engage with people who haven't. So this can be a really helpful space to both see your tracking insights, but also make them a little more actionable by filtering them and finding the information that you find most valuable. A couple other things that you'll see here, especially like if we click into a thread, is that you have a reminders option. This option lives in a few different places within Mixmax. So first of all, you'll see it here, as you can see on a thread that's open, and you can apply a reminder to an open thread. So what this does is it essentially allows you to kind of put a bookmark on a specific email thread that you want to follow up on later. So you could maybe say, well, I haven't heard back on this thread yet. If I don't hear back by this time next week, I want to reach out again. And maybe you can leave yourself a little note that says, please get this scheduled before end of week, right? And then you can set the reminder. it will archive this email thread so it's out of your inbox. And then at the time that you designated on the reminder, it will bump it back up with one of these Mixmax reminder labels with the reminders, just sort of an email to yourself and the note that you left yourself within that email. So really, it's just a way for you to bump up information and make sure that if you're starting a lot of threads one-off, that you have a consistent way of following up if they go unanswered. You don't want things to get lost in your inbox. So that's one way that you can add the reminder. Another is within the compose window. So when you open a new message and try to send it out, you have that same little alarm clock, and you have the same options here to give yourself a note and to follow up. So a couple different ways you can add those, both on existing threads and on brand new emails that you're sending out. Once a reminder is added, you'll see this little reminder bar. So you'll know like this email is going to have a reminder attached to it, and it will say the date and time. All right. A couple of other things here. We do also have a Mixmax collaborators tag or label that we may apply if you are using the collaborators feature. You can think of collaborators as sort of a leveled up BCC. This will help you coordinate and communicate with other users in your team who have Mixmax enabled on a thread. So for example, let's say that this thread is something important and client facing that I want to pull my manager in on to talk about and work through a client concern, maybe like a pricing concern. I can go ahead and open up again the sidebar, or I can click this collaborators tag, and I can see I already have some collaborators added here. I'm going to go ahead and remove them. And so if I add a collaborator, what will happen? Let's say I want to add my manager, Hugo. Now Hugo will see this thread in his inbox. He'll see all of the messages back and forth, the full context and history of the thread, but he won't be added to it like as a CC or a recipient. He'll just have visual access to it. And then he can come into the sidebar and chat back and forth with me about the context of this email. So let's say again that the client is asking for updated pricing or wants to work out a special deal with us. I can mention Hugo and say, what pricing options do we have for this client? And then Hugo can respond to me right here within this chat space. And we don't have to leave Gmail. We can just stay right here and go back and forth until there's resolution. At which point, once things are resolved, I can go ahead and remove him. Oops, where is he? There we go. And now this thread is removed from his inbox, and he's no longer going to see the subsequent messages. So it's a little more flexible than a BCC. It also gives you some options for communication around the thread that keep you within Gmail instead of having to jump between platforms to have these types of conversations. So once you've added a collaborator, again, that's when you'll see that collaborator label. And you can, organize your thoughts around your collaborator email threads by clicking into the label itself, where you'll see anything that has a collaborator added to it. You can, again, do this on existing threads, which I just showed you, or you can add collaborators right out of the gate on fresh emails. And again, I would think of this as a replacement for BCC. So if you were going to BCC somebody on a thread, you may consider adding them as a collaborator instead. Now that we have those sorts of features gone through, we're going to go through what's here in the compose window when you download Mixmax. So we touched already on reminders and collaborators. You also have a meetings feature here, and this is a really powerful part of Mixmax. You have a couple of different meeting scheduling functionalities available to you. The first is share availability. So I'm just going to click into that and open it. This is a great way to work internally scheduling meetings or with a client or somebody who you know is going to get back to you relatively reliably. Because what you're doing here is presenting some limited availability for the next, maybe few days or a specific time frame to a recipient for them to choose from. So this left-hand side is where you kind of set up what you want the invite to look like and how you want it to act. So here you go ahead and give your meeting a title. Maybe I call this like Zoom coffee. For where, if you are meeting up specifically with somebody, you could put the place where you're meeting here. Alternatively, you could also go ahead and integrate with Zoom, and I'll show you where to do that in the dashboard in just a bit. But you can integrate with Zoom, and this will pull up a new Zoom meeting for any meeting that you book through this interface. So you can skip kind of all of that Zoom scheduling drama and just go ahead and directly create links when you're scheduling or booking meetings through Mixmax. Schedule on is generally kind of left as is. I would recommend, if unless you have special considerations for scheduling, to leave these defaults as they are. Some additional options you have if you are working in a specific role where you are maybe scheduling on the behalf of somebody else is to use this drop down. Make sure your calendars are shared appropriately in Gmail, that you have edit access to the person you schedule for. And then they should appear here if they have a seat in Mixmax, and you can schedule onto their calendar instead of onto your own. Again, for most people, just leaving it as your own calendar is your best bet. Prevent double booking. Having this checked will make sure that if a meeting is booked over a time that you list, or if you have something on your calendar that you have already scheduled, that we won't ever double book over the top of that. So you're never, in two meetings at once. And then allowing guests to modify will allow your recipient, or the person who schedules with you, to make updates to the invite. So that might mean like they add another attendee to the meeting, or maybe update some of the language in the description, etc. And then here in time zone, it's exactly as it sounds. So here in this space, we're pulling in your Gmail calendar settings. So whatever time zone you're in for your existing calendar is what we're presenting those times to for you here. But this will allow you to send those times in your recipient's time zone. So for example, if you work in San Francisco, but the client that you're trying to schedule with is in New York, your calendar here is going to display in Pacific time, but you may want to send over availability in their time zone in Eastern time. So you can go ahead and set that here. And then when I drop these into the email, which I'll show you in just a bit, they'll present themselves in Eastern time. So it's a little easier for your recipient to see their availability and to match something up. And then for additional guests, you can go ahead and include anybody else here who needs to be part of this meeting. This can be internal or external, and whoever you list here will receive a calendar invite for this meeting once it's booked. So I'll go ahead and include Hugo again. He is my favorite example. And then also maybe my colleague, Grace. Custom fields will allow you to ask some additional questions before the booking is completed by your recipient. So a lot of times what we see people do here is ask for information that will help them continue to connect with this person in the future. So things like phone number are common. LinkedIn, if this is not somebody who is within your own organization. And the great news here is that you can choose to make these optional or required. So if you're at all concerned that this will become like a barrier to booking, you can go ahead and make it optional, and the person can bypass this and just provide the information if they want to. Here in the sort of middle column, we have any colleagues who have shared their calendar with us for visibility. So as I am looking here, I have Hugo and Grace, who both need to be part of this meeting. I can go ahead and highlight them here because they've shared their calendar visibility with me. And now I can pick times when I know that they are also free. And that's just what I'm doing here. I'm going through and selecting times where I'm free, keeping in mind that this is going to present in Eastern time. So maybe this late is not going to be a great fit, but I can move through here and just select any of the times that are going to make sense. You can determine how long you want these slots to be. So you can choose here, we default to 30 minutes, and then you can go ahead and insert times. And what this does is it just creates a nice little scheduling widget within the email itself that you can send out to your recipient, and they can click the time they like best and book automatically with you. When they do that, you'll receive an email which will inform you that a meeting has been scheduled. You'll also have the meeting on your calendar. And if the user changes the meeting at all, for example, reschedules it or cancels it, anything like that, you'll receive a notification via email. This is a great tool. Again, I think primarily to be used if you are communicating with people who you are expecting a prompt response from, right? Because if Tuesday, May 18th comes and no meeting is booked, then you have to go through this process again of creating this meeting invite, sending out times. You're stuck in that kind of scheduling loop that we're trying to avoid when we use tools like this. So we do have a solution for you if you're somebody who's doing more like outbound work to clients to generate meetings, and those clients may not get back to you, or prospects may not get back to you as immediately or as promptly as somebody internally. So for those use cases, we have calendar links. And what these do, I'm just going to drop one in here and show you what they do. So I'm going to go ahead and click here. So what these do is, rather than presenting a limited set of availability, you're providing a direct link to your calendar that you can use today or 1 year from now, and it will always show your most up-to-date availability. So this is a lot more flexible for those of you who, again, are trying to generate meetings with maybe cold prospects or clients who are a bit harder to reach. So this will just consistently update for you all the time your most up-to-date availability, evergreen. To create these, you do need to go into the dashboard. So this is one of those examples where the thing that we create in the dashboard will become accessible to us in Gmail. And to get there, we just click this Mixmax M and go to meeting templates. And this will bring us right to where we need to be. I'm just going to remove this one because it's a duplicate. So here you have your interface for creating your calendar link. A lot of this shares kind of similarities with shared availability, right? You're going to set up your meeting description here. You have the same option to add fields or additional questions, but there are just a couple of key differences, and also just some more kind of parameters that you can set around these here below. So I'm going to go through those with you now. Let's go ahead and create a new one. I'm just doing that by clicking this purple template. We'll call this one coffee date. And in the title here, one of the differences from shared availability that you have access to in the meeting template is the access to variables for the title. Because we built this feature with the intent of you being able to use it across platforms and across time for different recipients, we give you the ability to add variable information. So like, for example, a first name or a company name, so that when the person schedules this meeting and books a meeting with you, it still has their first name or their company name in the title, and it feels personalized for them. So to do this, we just go ahead and maybe type in your company name. Like for us, it would be Mixmax. And then maybe we use these brackets or the menu here to pull in the Salesforce account name if you connect with Salesforce. If you're not integrating with Salesforce, you can also just do like guest first name, and that will still give them that personalized experience without having to integrate with anything. So I'm going to go account name. There we go. One of the things that's really important, both within the context of meeting templates and within Mixmax at large, if you're using variables, is that we will require a fallback for you to move forward. And what a fallback does is it ensures that if you are using this variable information that you're asking us to pull in, that if for some reason that data is missing or inaccessible to us, we have a backup option so that the automation doesn't look broken when you book a meeting. So our advice here is generally to just put something very applicable to everybody. So maybe like your team or something like that. And then maybe like coffee one-on-one. Something that will tell them who their meeting is with and what the meeting is about or structured around. You also have access to your Zoom integration here. You can just flip that on, and that will pull in any Zoom information. Of course, you also have the option to include a specific place if you need to or want to. Fields, you can go ahead and add if you want to. Those are where you can add additional questions. The link here is unique to the calendar template because you need to tell us how the link itself should look in the browser. This will also make it feel a little more personal and customized and polished, updating the space. You could totally leave it as is if you wanted to, but giving it a little bit of a personalization goes a long way. So maybe we just call this coffee chat, Mixmax coffee chat. And then you can give this the title like book now. Available times is unique to meeting templates. This gives you the opportunity to set up some guardrails around when you want these types of meetings to happen. So let's say that this coffee date or this coffee chat that we're setting up is specifically for external clients. If you are a person who doesn't take external meetings on like a Friday, for example, or a Monday, I've seen that before, then you can uncheck those days and will never display availability for this type of meeting on those days. And this is another big reason why we have the option to create multiple of these meeting templates, because you probably hold a multitude of different types of meetings that you may want to use this feature for, and you can set up different scheduling parameters around each one. The one thing to keep in mind here is that we are already going to respect any existing appointments that you have on your calendar. So if, for example, you block out lunch every day or like an exercise class that you take every day or something like that, we're already going to respect that as a standing appointment on your calendar, and we won't let people book over that. So this is really just for any specific scheduling guidelines for this type of meeting that doesn't apply to other types of meetings that you're holding. For options here, you're just determining, again, how this should present your availability. So offer times is saying how far in advance someone can book with you, so 21 days in advance. And then how soon, so 1 day from now. You could set this to 0, and this would open up your availability immediately for this type of meeting. So you could send this out to somebody right now, and they could book you in your next available slot. Duration, you can decide how long you want your meeting to be. This is a little more flexible than the shared availability duration. So you can give it kind of like its own little, maybe like off time. 25 minutes is becoming more popular. And then you can offer slots every 15 minutes. So what this does is ensures that rather than only offering times every half an hour, you're offering times every 15 minutes. And then buffering time, of course, is just giving yourself a little bit of breathing room between meetings. These last two in this section are on by default. So if you don't want to fuss with them, you don't have to. But what they do is they link back to the original thread within the email or within the calendar invite itself. So if the person that you're meeting with needs additional context about what this meeting is and why they're having it, they can link back to the email thread that they booked it through. And then guests can modify again, allowing your guests rather to update recipients or attendees or the text of the description, things like that. Here in this sort of last little bit, we have a way to create calendars that are shared between coworkers. So if you're like me, some of the meetings that I hold most frequently are held with another person on my team. So maybe your manager is a good example, or a person who maybe you solve support tickets with. That's a common one for me. And it might make sense if you're hosting meetings consistently with another person to have a shared calendar with them. And the way to build that is, first of all, to make sure they have a Mixmax seat, and then also to put them here. So if I want to have this coffee chat be with my manager and the person that I'm meeting with, I can put Hugo here, and this will make sure that we're preventing double booking on his calendar. His appointments are respected. And then also add him here under default guests, which will ensure that he's added as a default guest to any meeting that's booked through this link. And then last but not least, you have this little piece of automation at the very end that you can flip on if you want to. And this will just make sure that if you use this feature and somebody schedules a time with you, that before that time, they receive a reminder email that the meeting is coming up. My favorite time frame for this is every 3 hours before a meeting. This just feels like a really comfy spot for me, but you can set this up however you want to, however many days, minutes, hours before the meeting. And this meeting will include, well, this template already includes rather, meeting time and details. So they'll get that information. But this template is also fully customizable. So if you wanted to, if this was like an intro meeting or something that you wanted to present materials for, you could include those materials as an attachment, so long as they were the same for each person who is booking this type of meeting. So fully customizable, really great way to build in a little reminder so that everybody is reoriented to this meeting, especially if it's booked, you know, as 21 days out. This will give them a nice bit of context. Once you have this created, you can go ahead and copy the link and jump back into Gmail. And you can use it within your emails. So you can go ahead and go to meetings, go to insert calendar link, and you should see coffee date is this first one that I made. And it immediately hyperlinks with my Mixmax calendar. You can remove Mixmax if you want to. And there you have it. It's a direct link to your calendar with your availability designated. There's a couple of different ways that you can use this. You can, of course, drop this link into any number of platforms. I've seen people use these on LinkedIn to book meetings that way. So very flexible in that sense. But you can also use it in a few different ways in Mixmax too. So you can drop that in as I just showed you. You can also use our / command meeting, and coffee date will pop up there. And I can use maybe 5 meetings available. And then what this does is it takes all of the parameters that we set up around that meeting type, and it drops in that into the shared availability feature. So you get the kind of the best of both worlds, where you are only presenting availability on the days that you want to, within the hours that you want to, with all of the length and time considerations that you've put into building out those meeting templates, but with the shared availability interface, which is kind of a fan favorite for a lot of our clients. So that's another cool way to use it. For those of you who are doing a lot of like templatized outreach, building templates, using sequences, my favorite way to use it is to include a call to action button. And that pulls in from the Mixmax enhancements coin. So this is where you can pull in a number of enhancements. We can't touch on all of them, but surveys are here, PDF previews, images, video previews, all of that good stuff you can pull in. And I recommend that you explore that when you get the chance to. But for this particular example, we're going to use the call to action button. It's going to open up this little pop-up where I can make a book now button and drop in the link and insert it into my email. And that then creates a really nice formatted button that I can save and use over and over again in sequences and templates to just create a really nice, concise booking experience for the person that I am working with. I'm going to go ahead and build this out a little bit more. So let's say that this is a outbound email that I'm going to, type out and structure for a client who I'm trying to have a Zoom coffee with. I'm just going to build out a little bit of text here, and then we're going to touch on how to make a template. So, hey there, I saw you were on our website. Let's connect and share more about your goals. Very simple, not the best for cold outbound. I wouldn't recommend this copy, but it is a good enough example for now. So let's say that you've spent an hour or so, 15 minutes even, typing out this beautiful kind of outbound email that you want to send out to a prospect, and you want to use it again for other prospects in the future. You can do that if you've typed it out here in Gmail by clicking templates and clicking into save this message as a template. This is going to take a second to open up and load. So just a second here. All right, here we are. So you can see that it pulls in all of your content that you've typed out. So if you can imagine if this was an email that you put a ton of effort into, this will be really nice. You can pull it in automatically. You don't have to copy and paste or worry about typing it all out again. Go ahead and give it a title. So maybe this is like, oops, first outbound coffee chat, something like that. Save it, pick the folder you want to save it to. And then you can further edit it from here. So for example, an edit that I see people making a lot with templates is that instead of there, they maybe again want to pull in recipient first name as a variable so that when this template is inserted in the future into Mixmax or into Gmail, that variable is there and is updated with the new recipient's first name. You have access to all of your variables here. So you could do that with first name and any other information that you want to pull in, so long as it's present for you in Salesforce, or you're willing to type it in Gmail when you're using this template. You also have access to all of your enhancements here. So we have the call to action button already, but you can also use any of our surveys, any of these sort of enhancement previews, anything that you think would add some pizzazz to your email and make it stand out. You can go ahead and pop that in here. Once you feel good about this, you go ahead and save it. If you go to your personal folder where I saved it, I've got a bunch of them saved in here. We should be able to find it. There it is. And I can also start to access it and use it within Gmail. So let's say that this is now a new prospect who I'm talking to for the first time. I can go to my personal folder, find the coffee chat template that I just created. You can see it pulls in my variable. And as soon as I drop in a recipient, it will update their first name for me, and I can go ahead and send it out. This is a really key feature for just efficiency's sake. It will really help you move more quickly through your day if you are reaching out with kind of similar information across prospects. So I definitely recommend creating a nice set of templates that you can access using this template library here. Once you have your templates kind of rolling a little bit, or have a nice library built out, you'll start to see statistics related to that as well in the dashboard. So as I mentioned at the beginning, the other purpose of the dashboard outside of just creating assets to use in Gmail and in Salesforce is also for you to check on the efficacy of the assets that you're making. So you can see here, we'll start to populate some data about the templates that you've created and what their effect is on your recipients. So maybe there's a couple more with some data in them, like this one. This one has some data tied to it. We can see how many times it's been opened, how many times it's been responded to. So this data becomes really helpful. You can also look kind of at a comprehensive list of your templates and which ones are performing best in the reports dashboard. Here under the top sequences, you can also look at your top templates. This is also just a great place to come in general to look at how your activity is trending, what types of responses you're getting, and to build out any custom reports that you want to make. All right, so we covered templates. There's a couple other spaces here in Gmail I want to touch on before we jump into sequences, which will be our last little bit of information here. So one feature that sometimes gets a little bit looked over, but I think is pretty cool, is send later. This will allow you to draft emails and then schedule them to send later. But I think what gets kind of hidden here is this recommended send times option. And what this can do is it will allow you, especially if you're coordinating with the person that you're emailing relatively often, it will aggregate all of their open data and present to you the best time to reach out to them, and allow you to schedule for that time. I love this feature. It's one of my favorites, especially because I work with clients across the globe. So this helps me send them emails in their time zone without having to think too much about it. Another good space here, we talked about enhancements already. We have a tracking space here as well, and this will allow you both to determine which parts of the email that you want to track. So opens will have on by default for the most part, but you can also track clicks and downloads if your admins haven't restricted that. And then also you can turn on some notifications if you want to. So you could get desktop notifications about the email if it's being opened or clicked, as well as smart email notifications and smart Slack notifications, which will advise you if the email has a lot of activity associated with it. For example, like multiple opens or anything like that. And then the last space that we're going to talk about here is the people tab within the dashboard. So we talked about collaborators, we talked about live feed, and kind of this next space is this little people address book. And this is actually a super powerful space. So if you have access to the sidebar, this is a place where you can have a pretty big impact on how much jumping around you have to do between platforms, so that while you're kind of gathering information and context about a person that you're emailing. So rather than, for example, putting Emily, let's say I'm emailing Emily, rather than putting Emily's email address into Gmail to see what I've sent out, and then into Salesforce to see what I have for records on her there, I can just put her here into the sidebar. And then I have basically all the context that I need about Emily and my relationship with her. So I can see that I've sent Emily a bunch of emails. I can see what she's done with those emails, if she's opened them, if she's replied to them. I also have her Salesforce records available to me here. So any accounts that she's associated with, her contact information, and then also any activity history, events, notes, anything like that. And this can be edited or updated as well. And if you have the Salesforce sync set up, then you will be able to, it's a bi-directional sync. So if you update something here, it will also update in Salesforce. You also have an outbox with Emily. So I have a meeting scheduled, an event with Emily coming up on May 20th, and I can see that here. I can also see any previous events that I've had with her. And also this is where if I had perhaps scheduled an email to go out to Emily, it would appear here in the outbox. Or if I had like a scheduled sequence stage coming up with her. I also have a quick access to a Google search or LinkedIn search. And then I can also email, call, or access her LinkedIn here as well. So helpful if you are somebody who is trying to gather as much information about the person that you're emailing as possible and get all of your context in one place. This sidebar is super helpful for that. This last space here with all these notifications is tasks, and they are related to sequences for the most part. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of time to touch on those when we jump into sequences. Okay, that is the deep dive run through of Gmail features related to Mixmax. Here we're back in the dashboard now, and I just want to touch on a couple other spaces here before we jump into sequences. So you have a live feed here as well. One of the first things that we talked about in this walkthrough was the live feed within Gmail. This is just a bigger version of that exact same thing. It gives you a little more context on what emails you sent out, who's opened them, and then you can also see this for your team as well. So that's the primary difference there. You can also save searches. So you can see only external emails. You can see some of these that we have saved. So this can give you just a little bit more of a specific view into your most recent activity if you build out some searches in the live feed. Reports we touched on a little bit. Outboxes where anything that's scheduled to go out later will go to live. So you can see I have some things associated to sequences here, things that I'm scheduling to send later, reminders, anything that isn't going out immediately from your inbox, but will go out soon, lives here. And you can update or change that information, pause or postpone scheduling or reschedule that email if you need to. So really handy spot if something changes with a prospect that you're reaching out to, or you need to update something about a scheduled email, this is your spot. The other space I want to show you is under your own personal settings and integrations. This is where you can integrate with all of the third-party services that connect with Mixmax. So you see we have a bunch of integrations here. They may not all apply to you, and you may not use all of the integrations that are available, but you can go ahead and integrate things like Slack and Zoom, and it will give you just a few more options for automation. Right, so we touched on where the Zoom integration affects meetings a fair amount in this call. So turning that on is key to making that experience as efficient as possible. And then Slack notifications too can be really helpful, and you can build out specific notifications if you want to, or use some of those tracking automation type things that are built into the product, so long as you're connected. And then of course there's Salesforce. And if your team are Salesforce users, you'll definitely want to come connect here so that your data is flowing in and out of Salesforce appropriately. You have a bunch of personal settings here too. You can definitely come click through these and they'll give you a ton of different ways to dial in your Mixmax experience. We don't have time to go through all of them here today, but this is a great space for you to come and kind of personalize how Mixmax works for you. Okay, now we're going to talk about sequences. Sequences are really a key part of Mixmax that will help you, especially if you're doing a lot of outbound work to clients or prospects, and you need to level up that experience by building in more follow-up or kind of allowing that follow-up to run in the background. So just in case any of you aren't familiar with what sequences do, they are a way for you to make scheduled, consistent outreach campaigns to your prospects over time. So I'm going to walk through this space and then we'll go ahead and create a sequence together. So this looks a lot like the template space. You have all of your folders here in the kind of middle column, and folders can be, of course, full of templates, or sorry, sequences. Folders can be shared with your team. So if you start to build out a big library of sequences or templates for that matter, you can go ahead and share them with your team so that everybody has access to them. And you have a can view and can edit access here. So that's true from anything that you can share on Mixmax. You can limit the access to that asset, a little bit by just giving can view access, which would mean that the person on the receiving end couldn't change or update any of the language in the asset that you're sharing, but they could use it. Whereas with can edit would allow them to see the asset and then make updates to the language or copy. Okay, so once you have kind of your folders created and you have a place to put your sequence, you can go ahead and create a sequence. I'm going to go ahead and call this like a coffee chat sequence. Let's say that my goal here is I have a list of new clients who I need to reach out to and schedule coffee chats with as our first intro to each other. So that's the scenario we're going to run with. To help get this started, I'm going to create a sequence and upload all of those new clients into this sequence so that I can run an email campaign to get as many of these meetings scheduled as quickly as possible. To do that, again, I would just upload my recipients into this list. So I would put the whole list in at once. And there's a few different ways that you can do that. The first is to use Salesforce. So if you're a person who's integrating with Salesforce, this is a really handy integration for you. You can pull them in as leads or as contacts using list views. But if you're not integrating with Salesforce, then you can also use a contact list that you upload into Mixmax, or you can use a CSV. So you can create a spreadsheet and download it as a CSV and then upload it here into Mixmax. And finally, you can also just go ahead and type in some recipients. And we'll just go Grace. So you can do this manually as well. It takes a little bit longer, but it does work if that's how you want to do it. I also recommend that if you're planning on including any variables within the sequence that you create, and I'll touch on that in a bit, that you include those here as columns. Whether you're using Salesforce or a CSV or manually putting these in as I am now, any information that you want to include in your sequence, you should put here. So for example, maybe company name. And maybe even first name. Okay, once you have that set up, you can go ahead and click Edit Stages, and you'll see, oops, sorry, I made a mistake. There we go. So you can go back and fix any mistakes that you made, as I just did. And then you can enter the sequence creation space. And this is where you can actually build out the content of the sequence that you are building. So you can see here that I'm basically building out stages. And the way that I like to help people think about this, especially if you're building a sequence for the first time, is to first identify how long you want to reach out to these particular folks for. So a good place to start is maybe 6 weeks, right? You're going to send maybe 3 to 5 emails over 6 weeks in hopes to get a meeting scheduled with these folks. So with that in mind, I would use sort of that time frame to build out my stages. So if this is going to be over 6 weeks and I'm going to have maybe 5 stages, let's go with 4. 4 stages over 6 weeks. I can go ahead and pop all those in like that. And then I can decide what I want in each stage. So right now we're scheduling these are automatic emails, meaning that once I activate this sequence with these recipients, these emails will start to fire off automatically. You won't have to push send on it. You won't have to do anything other than add them here and click activate. So this first stage is typically introductory. It says who you are. It says what you're hoping to get out of the email that you're sending. And you can do a number of things here. You could type out an email and do it that way. Or you could use one of the hopefully many templates that you've created and drop those in instead. It's really my advice generally to create templates first when you are building out a sequence and have them in your template library and then pull them in to sequences. There's a number of good reasons to do that. The first is that you'll be able to capture information about the template and about the content of the template outside of the efficacy of the sequence. So you can break those out into separate data sets. And then also, it makes it a lot easier to change or update information in a sequence. So for example, if you decide that once the sequence is activated, the stage 2 template that you've put here is not good, or you want to change it or update it, you can just delete what's there and drop in a new template. Much easier. Oops. Get rid of that. Okay, so once you have the content of your first stage figured out, I'm just going to drop in something easy here. Here we go. We'll just use this for now. We have a bunch of variables here that we're not pulling in, which is fine. Again, you have full access to all of your variables. So you can see this particular template that I created has a bunch of Salesforce variables. And then I can give it a subject. and then move on to the next stage. So in the next stage, we have a couple new pieces of logic to comb out. So because this is a sequence we've decided that's going to take place over 6 weeks with 4 stages, we have to decide at what interval we're sending those stages out over that time. So this is what we're doing with this logic. We're saying if this previous email is not replied to, and then let's do maybe 6 weekdays, then this next email will be sent. And then you can, again, just drop in a template or type something out as a follow-up. You can determine if this follow-up is sent threaded to the previous email, or if you want it to just go out as is. And then you continue to do that with each stage until you've created a sequence that touches each prospect 4 times over 6 weeks. The important thing to remember here is that here you're setting the logic on how a recipient will exit the sequence. So for example, in this first stage that we created, if they were to respond to this, because of the logic that we've applied in the second stage, which is if it's not replied to, if they respond to this first stage, they'll be exited from the sequence and they won't receive any subsequent stages. So this logic here is pretty important. If you say regardless, then what will happen is that they will receive the next stage no matter what happens with the previous one. A couple other kind of like tips and tricks here is that if you have a relatively short list or a list of people that you want to reach out to here, you can click into those individuals and personalize the emails that they'll receive for each recipient. So you can give it a little bit of a personal touch before sending it out and activating it so that the recipient, again, feels like they're getting something that's meant for them and only them. Once you feel good about what you've built out, you can go ahead and confirm and activate. This will bring you to the final page of the sequence creation process, and it'll give you a bunch of additional options about how we should treat the recipients in your sequence. So first, you have additional options for tracking. You can decide which activities you want to track within the sequence, just like with an individual one-off email. And then you also have some advanced settings that you can choose to apply. Sorry about that. I have a little dog and there's a mailman here. He's very cliche in that way. But anyways, you have additional recipient options that you can apply here. So if you for example, want to build additional barriers around when a recipient shouldn't receive your sequence, you can do that here. So we'll automatically check that if they've received the sequence before, that they shouldn't receive it again. And then if they're active in another sequence, so if you have multiple sequences running at the same time, you can go ahead and make sure that they're only getting one of those sequences at a time. And then also if they're already active in a sequence from another group. So if you're part of a bigger organization with multiple teams using Mixmax, you can build additional guardrails here to make sure that there is not an accounting team and a CS team and a sales team all reaching out to the same person at the same time. And then last here, you have the ability to remove the recipient from a sequence when you receive an email from them, whether or not it's a reply to the sequence. So if they just wake up one day out of the blue and decide to email you, then they will be removed. And also if a meeting is booked with the recipient. So if they do take that action and book a meeting with you, that would remove them automatically as well. Of course, we'll follow the logic in the sequence that you created. So if you say if they reply to the sequence to remove them, we'll do that as well. This just gives you additional options. And once all of that is set up, you are good to activate the recipients and start the sequence. And this will go ahead and start sending those out for you. And it will run in the background and allow you to kind of continue to reach out to people over time without spending all of your energy and efforts trying to follow up and keep on top of everything. That is a crash course in Mixmax. There's other features here that you should definitely explore. And also even more features within sequences that we weren't able to touch on, like using tasks and things like that. So definitely explore those things if you have the right seat type for that. And yeah, continue to let us know for the next minute or so if you have questions. You can also access our support team at support@mixmax.com, and they'll be able to help you with any technical hurdles that you run into that you need help with. So it's been a pleasure, and we'll be here for the next minute or so to answer any remaining questions.